Hello everyone, it's Edward again, your storyteller. Henry VIII, one of the most iconic monarchs in British history, ruled England from 1509 to 1547. Born on June 28, 1491, to Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, he was the second Tudor king. Henry VIII is best remembered for his 6 marriages and his role in the separation of the Church of England from the Roman Catholic Church. A charismatic and imposing figure, Henry was well-educated and an accomplished athlete, musician, and patron of the arts. His reign was marked by significant political and religious upheaval, including the dissolution of the monasteries and the establishment of the Royal Navy. Despite his numerous achievements, Henry's later years were marred by health issues and political strife, but his legacy profoundly shaped the course of English history. Henry VIII's marriages were driven by his desire for a male heir and personal passions, and they significantly impacted the religious and political landscape of England. Catherine of Aragon from 1509 to 1533, Henry's first wife, originally married to his brother Arthur. They had one surviving daughter, Mary. The marriage was annulled after Henry sought a male heir and fell in love with Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn from 1533 to 1536, Henry married and after annulling his marriage to Catherine. Anne gave birth to Elizabeth, the future queen, but failed to produce a male heir. Accused of treason, adultery, and incest, Anne was executed. Jane Seymour from 1536 to 1537, Henry's third wife, bore him his only male heir, Edward VI, but died shortly after childbirth. Jane is often considered Henry's favorite wife, as she gave him the son he desired. Anne of Cleves 1548, political marriage to the German princess that was annulled after 6 months. Henry found her unattractive, and the marriage was never consummated, but they remained friends. Katherine Howard from 1540 to 1542, a young and lively cousin of Anne Boleyn. Catherine was executed for adultery after less than 2 years of marriage, following accusations of infidelity. Catherine Parr from 1543 to 1547, Henry's 6th and final wife, who outlived him. She was a widow twice before and played a significant role in reconciling Henry with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, and managed his health issues in his final years. Let's review each one individually. Henry VIII was born on June 28, 1491, at Greenwich Palace, London. He was the second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. His birth was a significant event, as he was part of the newly established Tudor dynasty that had emerged victorious from the Wars of the Roses, a series of civil wars for control of the English throne. At the time of his birth, Henry was not expected to become king. His older brother, Arthur, Prince of Wales, was the heir apparent. Henry's early years were relatively quiet, and he received a comprehensive education in subjects like theology, languages, music, and the arts, befitting a prince of his status. Arthur, his elder brother, was married to Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess and the youngest daughter of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. The marriage was part of a strategic alliance between England and Spain. After their marriage, Arthur and Catherine moved to Ludlow Castle in Shropshire, where Arthur was to fulfill his role as Prince of Wales. However, in early 1502, both Arthur and Catherine fell seriously ill, possibly with the sweating sickness or tuberculosis. While Catherine recovered, Arthur's health deteriorated, and he died on April 2, 1502, at the age of 15. Arthur's death had profound consequences for the Tudor dynasty. As the eldest son and heir to the throne, his death left his younger brother Henry as the new heir. This sudden change in succession dramatically altered Henry's life trajectory, ultimately leading him to become one of England's most famous monarchs. Following Arthur's death, Catherine of Aragon's future became uncertain. She remained in England. Henry VIII became king on April 21, 1509, following the death of his father, Henry VII. At the time of his ascension, Henry was just 17 years old. His coronation took place on June 24, 1509, at Westminster Abbey. Henry's rise to power was marked by high expectations for a prosperous and stable reign, given his youth, education, and the consolidation of power achieved by his father, which had ended the Wars of the Roses and stabilized the kingdom. After Arthur's death in 1502, Catherine's status was uncertain. She remained in England, and diplomatic negotiations eventually led to her betrothal to Henry. However, this required a papal dispensation because canon law forbade a man from marrying his brother's widow. Pope Julius II granted the dispensation, which stated that Catherine's marriage to Arthur had not been consummated. Henry and Catherine were married on June 11, 1509, just weeks before Henry's coronation. Their marriage was initially a harmonious and politically advantageous union. Catherine was well educated, devoutly religious, and popular among the English people. She played a significant role as queen consort, often serving as regent when Henry was away on military campaigns. The early years of Henry and Catherine's marriage were marked by mutual respect and affection. Catherine gave birth to several children, but only one survived infancy, their daughter, Mary, born in 1516. Despite Catherine's efforts, the lack of a surviving male heir became a source of great disappointment and tension. Henry's marriage to Catherine would later become one of the most significant issues of his reign. Desiring a male heir and increasingly infatuated with Anne Boleyn, Henry sought an annulment of his marriage to Catherine. The Pope's refusal to grant the annulment led to England's break from the Roman Catholic Church and the establishment of the Church of England, with Henry as its supreme head. The marriage to Catherine of Aragon thus set the stage for many of the religious and political transformations that characterized Henry VIII's reign. Henry VIII's marriage to Anne Boleyn was one of the most consequential and controversial events of his reign, leading to England's break from the Roman Catholic Church and the establishment of the Church of England. Anne Boleyn entered Henry's court around 1522, serving as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. Unlike many women at court, Anne was well-educated, charismatic, and ambitious. She caught Henry's eye in the mid-1520s, and he quickly became enamored with her. Anne, however, refused to become his mistress, insisting on marriage. By the late 1520s, Henry was desperate for a male heir, which Catherine had failed to provide. He sought an annulment of his marriage to Catherine, arguing that their marriage was invalid due to her previous marriage to his brother, Arthur. However, Pope Clement VII, under the influence of Catherine's nephew, Emperor Charles V, refused to grant the annulment. Frustrated, Henry decided to separate England from the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. This decision led to the English Reformation, the establishment of the Church of England, and Henry's self-appointment as its supreme head. This allowed him to annul his marriage to Catherine without papal approval. Henry and Anne were secretly married on January 25, 1533, after Anne became pregnant. To legitimize their union and the anticipated child, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer declared Henry's marriage to Catherine null and void in May 1533. Anne was crowned queen consort in a lavish ceremony on June 1, 1533, at Westminster Abbey. On September 7, 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, who would later become one of England's greatest monarchs, Queen Elizabeth I. However, Anne's failure to produce a male heir led to Henry's growing discontent. Anne suffered several miscarriages, and by 1536, Henry's affections had shifted to Jane Seymour. In May 1536, Anne was arrested and charged with adultery, incest, and high treason. She was found guilty, and on May 19, 1536, she was executed at the Tower of London. Anne Boleyn's marriage to Henry VIII was a turning point in English history. It precipitated the English Reformation and fundamentally changed the religious and political landscape of the country. Despite her tragic end, Anne's daughter Elizabeth I would go on to have a long and successful reign, shaping the future of England and its empire. Jane Seymour entered the royal court as a lady-in-waiting to both Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. Unlike Anne Boleyn, Jane was known for her gentle and modest demeanor, which appealed to Henry, especially after the tumultuous and ultimately tragic relationship he had with Anne. Henry's interest in Jane grew as his marriage to Anne deteriorated. Within 24 hours of Anne Boleyn's execution on May 19, 1536, Henry became engaged to Jane. They were married on May 30, 1536, in the Queen's Closet at Whitehall Palace. Jane was never crowned queen, possibly due to the plague in London at the time and Henry's concerns about her health. As queen consort, Jane Seymour adopted a more conservative and subdued approach compared to her predecessor. She worked to reconcile Henry with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, both of whom had been declared illegitimate following the annulments of Henry's previous marriages. Jane's efforts were somewhat successful, especially with Mary, who returned to court. Jane's most significant contribution to Henry's legacy was the birth of a male heir. On October 12, 1537, Jane gave birth to Edward, the future Edward VI, at Hampton Court Palace. The birth of a healthy son was a monumental event for Henry, fulfilling his long-held desire for a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Tragically, Jane Seymour's health declined shortly after giving birth. She developed postpartum complications, likely puerperal fever, and died on October 24, 1537, less than 2 weeks after Edward's birth. Henry was deeply affected by her death, considering her his true wife due to her providing him with a male heir. Jane Seymour was the only one of Henry's wives to receive a queen's funeral, and she was buried in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Her son, Edward VI, succeeded Henry VIII in 1547, though his reign was short-lived due to his untimely death at the age of 15. Henry VIII chose to be buried beside Jane Seymour, reflecting his enduring affection for her and his gratitude for their son. Jane Seymour's marriage to Henry VIII, although brief, was crucial in the Tudor dynasty for providing the long-desired male heir and helping to stabilize the succession during a turbulent period in English history. By 1539, Henry VIII was seeking a new wife following the death of Jane Seymour and an unsuccessful attempt to marry Margaret of France. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister, advocated for a marriage alliance with Anne of Cleves, a German noblewoman, to strengthen ties with the Protestant states of the Holy Roman Empire. This alliance was deemed crucial given the threat of a Catholic coalition against England. Anne of Cleves was the daughter of John III, Duke of Cleves, and she was described as virtuous and gentle. Henry agreed to the marriage based on diplomatic portraits painted by Hans Holbein the Younger, which depicted Anne favorably. Henry first met Anne in person on January 1, 1540, at Rochester, before the formal ceremony. The meeting was disastrous. Henry found Anne unattractive and was immediately displeased. Despite his reservations, political pressure and arrangements compelled him to proceed with the marriage. They were married on January 6, 1540, at the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich. The marriage was never consummated, and Henry found it impossible to hide his dissatisfaction. He publicly referred to Anne as the Flanders mare, expressing his disappointment. The marriage was annulled on July 9, 1540, just 6 months after the wedding, on the grounds of non-consummation and Anne's pre-contract to Francis, Duke of Lorraine. Following the annulment, Anne was given a generous settlement, including Hever Castle, the former home of Anne Boleyn's family, and Richmond Palace. She was accorded the title of the king's beloved sister and remained in England for the rest of her life. Anne maintained a good relationship with Henry and his children and was present at court on various occasions. Anne of Cleves outlived Henry and all his other wives, passing away on July 16, 1557. Despite the marriage's failure, Anne's tact and acceptance of the annulment ensured her a comfortable and respected life in England. The marriage to Anne of Cleves highlighted Henry VIII's complex marital and political maneuvers. It also marked the downfall of Thomas Cromwell, who had arranged the match and was executed shortly after the annulment. The brief union with Anne of Cleves is often remembered as an episode of Henry's marital history driven more by politics than personal preference. Katherine Howard was a young cousin of Anne Boleyn and a lady-in-waiting to Henry's fourth wife, Anne of Cleves. Henry, who was in his late 40s at the time, was infatuated with the youthful and vivacious Catherine. They began a relationship while Henry was still married to Anne of Cleves. After Henry's marriage to Anne of Cleves was annulled, he quickly married Catherine Howard on July 28, 1540, at Oatlands Palace. Catherine was in her late teens or early 20s at the time of the marriage, while Henry was much older. Catherine Howard's downfall came about due to her past indiscretions and alleged infidelities. It was discovered that she had engaged in romantic relationships before her marriage to Henry, including with a courtier named Thomas Culpeper. These affairs came to light through investigations conducted by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer and members of the King's Council. Katherine Howard was arrested and interrogated in November 1541. She admitted to her premarital affairs but denied any infidelity during her marriage to Henry. However, the evidence against her was damning, and she was found guilty of adultery and treason. On February 13, 1542, Catherine Howard was executed by beheading at the Tower of London, alongside her lady-in-waiting, Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, who was implicated in her affairs. Catherine faced her execution with courage, and her final words reportedly expressed her repentance and desire for forgiveness. Catherine Howard's brief reign as queen consort and tragic end have left her with a somewhat overshadowed legacy compared to some of Henry's other wives. However, her story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of court intrigue and the perils faced by those who found themselves at the center of Henry VIII's tumultuous court. Henry VIII married Catherine Parr, his sixth and final wife, on July 12, 1543, at Hampton Court Palace. Catherine Parr was a widow twice before and known for her intelligence, piety, and compassionate nature. She served as a stabilizing influence on Henry during his later years. As queen consort, Catherine Parr took an active interest in education, theology, and political matters. She acted as a stepmother to Henry's children, particularly his three surviving children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. Catherine played a crucial role in reconciling Henry with his daughters, who had been declared illegitimate during his previous marriages. Henry VIII's health had been deteriorating for years, marked by obesity, ulcers, and other ailments. On January 28, 1547, Henry VIII died at the age of 55 at Whitehall Palace in London. His death marked the end of an era in English history, as well as the conclusion of his tumultuous reign, which had seen significant religious and political upheaval. After Henry VIII's death, Catherine Parr married Thomas Seymour in May 1547. However, their marriage was short-lived, as Catherine died on September 5, 1548, shortly after giving birth to a daughter named Mary. Catherine Parr's marriage to Henry VIII provided a period of relative stability and peace for both herself and the kingdom. Her influence on Henry's court and her efforts to reconcile Henry with his children left a lasting impact on English history. Catherine's own legacy as a queen consort, scholar, and advocate for religious reform endures to this day. In conclusion, the marriages of King Henry VIII provide a fascinating insight into the complexities of power, politics, and personal relationships during the Tudor era. From the quest for a male heir to religious upheaval and court intrigue, each union left an indelible mark on English history. Through triumphs and tragedies, Henry's wives played diverse roles, shaping the destiny of a nation and leaving a lasting legacy that continues to captivate and intrigue us to this day.